the lost Aramaic teaching of Jesus that still opens every closed door today. Ephatha, there is a word, one single word, that Jesus spoke in his original language, Aramaic, that has never lost its power. Not a metaphor, not a symbol, a living word, spoken aloud, that caused something sealed to open. When he stood before a man who had never heard a single sound, he did not touch him first. He spoke this word first, and everything that had been shut, ears, mouth, years of silence, cracked open in an instant. That word is Ephatha. It was not translated into your Bible. It was kept in Aramaic on purpose, because the sound itself is part of the command. The vibration is inseparable from the meaning. In the next few minutes, you are going to understand why this word still works, why Jesus chose it, and what happens when you speak it with the right intention. The moment Ephatha was spoken. In the 7th chapter of the Gospel of Mark, there is a scene that most people read too quickly. A man is brought to Jesus, a man who has been deaf from birth, who has never heard his own name spoken aloud, who communicates through a world of permanent silence. The people around him beg Jesus to lay his hands on him. But Jesus does something unexpected. He takes the man away from the crowd, puts his fingers in his ears, looks up to heaven, sighs deeply, and then speaks. He does not speak in Greek, the common language of the Gospel writers. He does not speak in Hebrew, the sacred tongue of the temple. He speaks in Aramaic, his own mother language, the language he used at home, with his disciples in his most intimate moments of teaching. And the word he chooses is Ephatha. The man's ears open immediately. His tongue is released. He begins to speak clearly for the first time in his life. Mark, who wrote this account, is so struck by the power of that original Aramaic sound that he refuses to translate it. He writes it exactly as Jesus said it. He wants the reader to see it, to feel it in its original form. That choice is not accidental. It tells us something profound. Some words carry their power in the sound itself, not only in what they mean, what Ephatha actually means, and why translation fails. In most translations render Ephatha simply as be opened. 2 words in English, clean, efficient, and almost entirely stripped of its depth. In Aramaic, the word comes from a root that implies far more than a physical door swinging wide. It carries the sense of removing a seal, of releasing something that was bound, of restoring what was always meant to flow freely. When Jesus spoke this word, he was not asking, he was declaring. He was not requesting that something open. He was commanding the state of openness itself to manifest. The Aramaic language is built this way. Its words do not merely describe reality, they address it directly. This is why mystics and scholars who have studied the original texts consistently note that something is lost, irretrievably lost, when Aramaic is flattened into Greek or Latin or English. The soul of the language does not transfer. The architecture of meaning collapses. What remains is a translation. What is gone is the living instruction. Ephatha spoken as Jesus spoke it, with the breath moving in a specific way through the mouth and throat, is not just a word about opening. It is an act of opening. It is a sound that, according to the ancient understanding, participates in what it declares. This is the layer of the text that most people never reach, not because it is hidden, but because no one explains it. What we are touching here is only the surface of something much older and deeper. Those who are already feeling the pull of this knowledge, there is a path waiting for you in the description below. The sound principle. Why the vibration matters. Ancient Aramaic was not simply a spoken language. It was understood, particularly in mystical and healing traditions, as a language of resonance. Each word was considered to carry a specific vibrational signature, one that could interact with the human body, with the space around a person, with what might be called the field of possibility. When Jesus sighed before speaking Ephatha, that was not a spontaneous emotional response. It was a deliberate act of breath preparation, a way of aligning the body to become a channel for what was about to be spoken. The sigh is part of the protocol. The looking upward was a posture of alignment, not theater. And then the word came, not shouted, not whispered, but spoken with the full authority of someone who understood exactly what they were doing. This understanding of sound as a force, not merely a carrier of meaning but an agent of change, is present in ancient Hebrew traditions, in early Christian mysticism, and in the Aramaic oral tradition that Jesus himself would have been formed within. The consonants in Ephatha create a pattern of opening in the mouth itself. Till lips part, the throat releases. The breath moves outward. Speaking this word with awareness is, in a physical sense, a rehearsal of the very thing it commands. What you are doing with your mouth, your body, and your intention becomes a unified act. This is not magic. This is precision. If what you are hearing right now is awakening something in you, you are not imagining it. There is a complete path available for those ready to work with Ephatha, using the correct sound, intention, and full protocol. The link is in the description. What Ephatha opens beyond the physical? The healing of the deaf man is the visible story, but those trained in the Aramaic tradition would have heard something else layered beneath it. In the ancient worldview, shared across Hebrew, Aramaic, and early Christian teaching, physical conditions were understood as reflections of deeper states. Deafness was not only an inability to hear sound, it could represent an inability to receive truth, to hear one's own inner guidance, to be open to what life is trying to communicate. Muteness was not only an absence of speech, it could represent the silencing of one's true voice, the inability to speak what one knows, the suppression of expression under the weight of fear or pain. When Jesus spoke Ephatha over this man, the tradition invites us to understand that he was addressing all of these layers simultaneously. The physical manifestation was the evidence, the proof that the deeper command had been received. This is why the disciples later used this understanding in their own ministry. This is why the early church preserved the Aramaic word rather than replacing it. They understood that Ephatha was not a medical intervention. It was a declaration addressed to every level of a human being. Body, voice, perception, spirit. It is a word that says, whatever in you has been sealed. Whatever in you has been forced shut, whatever in you was meant to be open and is not be opened. Now, why this word was preserved and what it asks of you. Of all the words Jesus spoke during his ministry, only a handful were preserved in their original Aramaic within the Greek gospel texts. This was a conscious editorial decision by the writers and early community. When Mark wrote Ephatha rather than the Greek equivalent, he was sending a signal to every reader across every century. Do not let this word be. Keep its sound alive. Here are similar moments in the Gospels. Talitha cum, Abba, Eli. Eli, Eli lama sabachthani, each preserved in Aramaic, precisely because the original utterance carried something that translation could not contain. Ephatha belongs in this sacred category. What this word asks of you is not belief in the modern sense. It is not asking you to adopt a doctrine or accept a creed. It is asking you to be willing to approach what has been closed in your life with the same directness that Jesus approached the deaf man. Willing to speak, not as someone who hopes something might happen, but as someone who understands that this word has been doing what it was spoken to do for 2,000 years and has not stopped. The question is not whether Ephatha works. The question is whether you are ready to let it work in you. That readiness is not something you manufacture. It is something you recognize when you encounter the word with understanding rather than merely with information. And that is exactly the difference between knowing about this word and knowing this word. Today we explored one of the most powerful words preserved from the lips of Jesus in his original language. We saw how Ephatha appears in the Gospel of Mark as a deliberate act of spoken authority. A word so charged with meaning and sound that the writer refused to translate it. We discovered that its depth goes far beyond the English phrase "be opened," touching on layers of physical, emotional, and spiritual release that the Aramaic tradition understood with great precision. We explored how the vibration and protocol of this word are inseparable from its power, and how the breath, the posture, and the intention of the speaker are all part of how this word functions. And we reflected on what this word is actually asking of us. Not belief, not performance, but willingness. The ancient world knew something about sound, intention, and the spoken word that the modern world is only beginning to rediscover. Ephatha is a doorway, and every door it represents was meant to be open. If this teaching moved something inside you, I want you to know that we are releasing an ebook in the coming days, the first complete guide to the two sacred Aramaic words, Ephatha and Ananura. It includes the correct sound of each word, their full meaning in the original tradition, and the complete protocol for working with them in your daily life. This is for those who are serious about going further. The link to access or pre-register is in the description below. Do not let this door close before you walk through it.